X-Men 97 is a fascinating case. It feels weird to only be on the second episode of this series and to already be covering one of the biggest fails of the grifter sphere on YouTube, but that's where we are.
X-Men 97 has completely destroyed Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers. It's over. It's done. It was a good run, but it's time to pack it up. It's over. I wanted to keep going, but this show has completely exposed me as the grifter that I always have been.
To me, my X-Men.
Now, if you already dislike these anti-woke grifters and want to know how to fight them, there is something easy you can do right now. I know it sounds self-serving, but liking this video, commenting, and subscribing to this channel do help take algorithm space away from these grifters. Before we even get into this grift, let me nerd out a bit. I've been a fan of X-Men since I was a teenager. I remember when I first started collecting comic books, the first comic book series I was really into was Spider-Man. I really loved getting a lot of Spider-Man issues, but then they started doing this storyline called the Clone Saga. And at first I thought it was very interesting. And it even introduced the second Spider-Man, Ben Reilly, and it was like, hey, here's Ben Reilly. He's going to be a new Spider-Man, and then pretty soon it felt like he was going to be the Spider-Man. They were pushing Peter Parker aside, and like at first it seemed like fun. Okay, let's experiment a bit, but it just kept on going on and on. And eventually, I frankly gave up. And I decided, you know what? I really like the X-Men animated series. Let's check out these X-Men comic books. Now, and fortunately enough, X-Men had just started a new storyline. It was called Legion Quest. About four or so of the X-Men going back in time and having to stop Xavier's son, Legion, from killing Magneto. That mission turned out to be a massive failure, but not in the way anybody expected, because when he went to kill Magneto, Xavier threw himself in the middle, and thus Legion ended up killing his own father. And create an alternate reality called Age of Apocalypse. And all of the X-Men comic books retitled and rebranded and became alternate universe versions of the story. And I frankly loved the ever-loving shit out of it. It was so goddamn cool. And then, of course, everything went back to normal eventually. But X-Men has, on and off frequently had like some really cool storylines. And X-Men's always been kind of cool in my book. Now, as somebody who read the comic books years ago and is kind of getting back into them now, what are my thoughts of this series? Well, I think it's pretty goddamn awesome. The worst thing I could say about this series is that there are a few aspects that seem semi-rushed and a bit half-hearted. And at its best, it's the best X-Men we've ever gotten. So let me go ahead and embrace the hate and dive into my problems with this series first. And also, big spoiler warning. The reveal of Madeline Pryor and her being Jean's clone and being a pawn of Sinister before becoming a good guy again feels very forced. Clearly, they had a goal for a character and just need to move her from point A to point B, and did so just to set up elements for later. The episode wasn't bad per se, but the problem is it was just one episode when a big event like that should be like a season-long arc. We also get the return of Mojo. The worst villain in the original animated series pops up for a half episode, and while this is his best appearance yet, and I understand doing something fun before the big impact episode, couldn't they do something with a villain with a better track record? I don't need remind of Mojo's nonsense.
Look at this! See this nose hair? It can act better than you!
Cards on the table. My favorite episode of this season was Remember It, and if you've seen it, you know why. But how the women are portrayed in this episode, mainly Jean and Rogue, comes off as weird. Both women seem to have flawed ideas about their relationships, and it takes a man to explain to them how things are supposed to be. First, we get Jean's scene with Wolverine.
Logan, I'm...
You're Jean Grey. He's Scott Summers.
Those are the rules. You just forgot them for a sec.
I understand Jean is going through some shit here, feeling distant from Scott, but this moment just doesn't feel right for where she's at. However, if this same moment happened later in the episode after Jean stumbles into Cyclops and Madeline's psychic calls, then it would make more sense. But as it is, it comes off very forced yet again. As for Rogue and Gambit's moment, Rogue comes off super shallow, while Gambit comes off as super cool and with it.
I can't touch you, Remy. Your heart may beat for me, but I can't feel it. You light up everything you touch, but never me.
Something's a bit deeper than skin, Cher.
Not this.
We be friends, mon ami. Just friends.
He knows she is wrong, and she is just letting the fact that she can touch Magneto cloud her judgment. However, with more context, the Rogue Gambit scene is a bit more excusable. See, Gambit has been super based throughout the series. He has some great to-the-point one-liners that really makes you like him.
Not the worst thing that don't go Magneto's way, don't you think?
The reason for that is... Okay, I'm serious now. Heavy spoiler incoming. Watch season 1 of X-Men 97 before proceeding. This is your last warning.
Gambit, see your bet and raise it. The cards always be in my favor.
Gambit was a supporting character for Rogue this season. He has nothing to learn. She has a lot to learn. We see after her conversation with Gambit and after having a magical moment with Magneto, she realizes she made a mistake.
Thanks for the dance, sugar. But Remy was right. Some things are deeper than skin.
Then tragedy.
Sorry for what?
Quite frankly, the handling of the Genosha massacre is kind of beautiful in an insanely tragic sort of way. Rogue, Magneto, and Gambit go to the island nation of Genosha where mutants are free and welcome to be themselves, and the three get to see the wonders of this place. Then, at the end, Magneto is presumed dead, Gambit is dead, and Rogue can be seen clutching his lifeless corpse in one of the most tear-jerking scenes a comic book fan can witness.
Sugar. I can't feel you.
And while it's technically a three-parter, one can't help but notice how Bright Eyes fairly seamlessly flows into the story, making the season feel like it ends on a four-parter. That is all the aftermath of that disaster. Which, by the way, Magneto freaking foreshadows in episode 2.
If I may offer advice, Scott, be wary. Be vigilant. Tragedy lures with fortune first.
Cyclops also gets a moment to foreshadow it just earlier in the episode where it happens.
Because I have to stomach your questions and prove that I'm a person. I lie because the truth is we're nothing like you. Thank God, because it's the only reason you people are still alive.
And also, to go back to episode 3, I may not be thrilled with the rushed nature of it, but the nightmare sequence is brilliant, straight from a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And honestly, X-Men in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie?
Shut up and take my money!
Rogue's turn to the dark side after the disaster is fantastic and completely on point for the events, as well as Magneto genuinely trying to follow Xavier's dream, only to suffer a tragedy that pushed him further away from it.
I promised a boy a future free of fear, only to watch his frightened eyes be vaporized inside his tiny skull, because he believed in me.
And even though it's a bit disconnected, Storm's loss of powers only to have to fight to get them back is pretty damn good as well. Also, foreshadowing her losing her powers is top-notch.
I have wondered what it would be like to be human. It is a tempting daydream, But then I remember how my mutant gifts brought me to this mansion, to this family.
Hell, if you rewatch the series, look for how much it foreshadows, because it does it so well throughout the entirety of its run. But even though the series is fantastic, the Chuds got a Chud. Can't stop the grifter. So what did they do?
Well, as we dig deeper, of course, the woke ideology seeps itself into this as they even make Morph non-binary.
The Chuds blew up when a story came out that Beau Demayo, the showrunner of season 1 of X-Men 97, said that his experience as a gay man informed the show.
All you have to do is look at the headlines from today. X-Men 97 executive producer Beau Demayo reveals the series' story is informed by his experience as a gay black man. Yes, that's what everyone should really base their story on, isn't it? Something that happened, a series that's so beloved that aired back in the 90s that you're gonna do an extension of today. You're gonna focus on your lived experiences as a gay black man when writing this story. What a complete joke. This thing is DOA.
Without context, they screamed groomer, implying that he was making the show and the characters gay. After all, what else could this report mean? Pulse was a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida. Beau saw it as a place of fun and freedom, a place where he could just let loose and be himself. That is, until June 12th, 2016, when a shooter entered the club and killed 49 people and wounded an additional 53. This was the inspiration for the episode Remember It, about Gambit, Rogue, and Magneto going to Genosha, a place set up for mutants to allow them to be free and themselves. A paradise where mutants don't have to worry about being discovered. Until Bastion drops a massive sentinel on the island, wiping it out in a matter of minutes and leaving very few survivors. The episode is brilliant and heartbreaking. This is why the Chuds and their hate grift is such bullshit. They judged a statement about a show out of context and condemned one of the best episodes of TV ever just because a gay man says he put a piece of himself in that art. Something that all artists do. But it felt like every time something about that show came out, they had to wage some sort of war against it. So we decided to make Morph, a character who can literally change their gender at will, non-binary.
Well, then we get this right here from X-Men Updates. Morph's characterization in X-Men 97. This is a lighter take on the character who is non-binary and has an interesting buddy relationship with Wolverine. The character's past with Mr. Sinister, the show's villain, could also come into play. And boom, done. See you later. It's over. I retweeted this. Simply put, fuck this show.
They gave Storm a mohawk look, just like she had in the comic books.
Obviously, you have Storm, which, listen, as I said, I know she had the mohawk in the comics. That is not why Disney is going with the SJW haircut. It's just not. It's just not.
And while we're on the topic of Storm, here's a frame of something where she's wearing a suit. Clearly, they are making her masculine.
Oh my God. Again, this is going to be in the thumbnail for sure. Like this fucking picture. Wow. Why would you do this to Storm? Why, man? God, Jesus. I don't know how much more of this I could take. The uglification of women. I mean, honestly, I'm going to have to read a lot of manga and watch a lot of anime to offset the unbelievable monstrosities that Western creators are coming out with, whether it's Western developers for gaming or Western studios for TV shows and movies. I don't know what's going on. All I know is there's ugly bitches making ugly characters. That's essentially what's really happening.
And did you know the X-Men aren't woke, and that people trying to force any wokeness into it are simply activists and should be fired from their jobs immediately?
And I mean, I guess to summarize it, I go through all of the evidence, Stan Lee's words himself, anybody saying that the X-Men was created to combat like a racial injustice or something like that, that is an objective lie. That is not true.
These are all, well, let's just say silly takes. But we can break them down one by one. Morph being non-binary is never once brought up in the season. The characters and the bio at the end simply refer to him as they, them. The voice actor revealed that Morph goes by they, them, he, him. That's pretty much it. Don't call Morph she, her, and you'll be fine. But for some reason, introducing a non binary character is adding too much sex for the show, intended for families. And it really does start to feel like too many people don't understand that the act of sex and gender identity are two completely different things. I mean, do these people literally think when a forum asks for your sex, it's asking about the physical activity? But not being appropriate for younger audiences seems to play a role in one of the Chud narratives that took hold in the lead up for X-Men 97. Least we forget, Assgate.
How many different shots of Rogue do we have? Because I'm curious if that was just a bad angle or if they really have.
No, they're de-emphasizing the ass. They're, like that's
yeah. And I mean her body in general. The same thing with Storm. You can see that she doesn't have an ass either in that last shot.
No, and both of them had pretty decent badunk-a-dunk. You know?
Yeah.
Everyone remembers every shot in the original animated series and how Rogue's ass was clearly shown in great detail, and each and every artist that drew it clearly did so with one hand. So obviously that's a joke. The Chuds are milking outrage over one scene in the original animated series and comparing it to the entirety of her ass in 97. Hell, let's take a look at that one scene too.
Cannot oppose me. You're corrupt, like all the others. You must be exterminated.
So, it's not even a sexy scene. It just feels like one of those Easter egg blink and you miss it moments when the artists decide to have fun drawing her ass. When you compare the entirety of both series to each other, you realize her ass is equally represented in both. And now I feel really weird realizing I just spent a chunk of this essay talking about animated characters' ass. As for Morph, the whole thing is weird. Morph is a shapeshifter who can literally change from male to female at will. This isn't to say that shapeshifting and being non-binary are the same thing, but it does make sense in a world where non-binary is an option. Someone who can be whatever gender they choose at any moment would go for it. But the Chuds pretend that their issue wasn't Morph being non-binary, claiming their issue was actually that the show will make a big deal of it, which it didn't. The characters just use they-them pronouns with Morph. That's it. Almost like making a video bashing something before you see it is a bad practice. But what about Storm? They're clearly pushing an agenda with her suit and her mohawk. So this is some of the weakest arguments ever. I think one of the most obvious things to get out of the way here. Storm is the girl boss that these guys decry all the time. She just is. It's the nature of the character. And you know what? This is a good thing. Storm has consistently been one of the most interesting X-Men in the franchise history. This is partially because her powers are awesome, and frankly, she is one of the most powerful X-Men. Hell, she is one of the most powerful heroes in the entire Marvel Universe in any iteration. But also because she isn't afraid to take the initiative. She takes charge in a heartbeat if the situation calls for it. We see this in X-Men 97 even. The team is getting overrun in Congress as the Proud Boys, the Friends of Humanity, attack. Meanwhile, Jean goes into labor. Cyclops finds himself distracted, but it doesn't matter because Storm recognizes she needs to take over and does so and makes sure Scott gets to see the birth of his child.
Rogue, fly Cyclops to Jean immediately. Magneto and I will protect the judges.
Be careful, Storm. It's still Magneto.
Circumstances do not offer us a choice.
But let's look at the specific arguments. First off, Storm's mohawk is one of her classic looks. Getting upset that she has it implies that you do not care for canon. But also, she loses it by the end of episode 6. So even if you don't like that look, it's gone before the end. And the suit, frankly, who cares on so many levels? Storm wears a suit semi-often. But also, this isn't a leaked frame from the show. This moment never appears in the show. This frame is from the X-Men 97 tie-in comic book that tells the story between the end of the original animated series and 97. Here's what's wild. If you want to criticize that comic book, you absolutely can. It's a somewhat lame surface-level story that is clearly designed to get fans from point A to point B and done just to cross-promote with the series. The comic book itself is fairly uninspired, but the suit, frankly, who cares? And it also has no role in the series whatsoever. So again, a case of bashing something without actually watching it. But then we also got this wave of videos declaring that the X-Men were never intended to be woke. Frankly, it's the same argument that happened when Stan Lee passed, and a lot of these guys literally just remade their old videos. Well, since I already debunked this a couple years ago, let me go ahead and be super lazy and just clip that.
I'm saying that to refer to that and say that it was created to be representative of the civil rights era is simply not true. And to try to...
So he is arguing something that no one is arguing. He is arguing against the idea that the X-Men were solely created only to be for social justice issues. Something that nobody is literally arguing against. So yes, guess what? I agree with you. They weren't made just for that. But to do that is to miss the point. The argument is that their social justice issues play a key role in the X-Men storyline, which they definitely do, depending on the writer. The argument has never been that's the only thing they're about. The argument is it's a key part of them. Congratulations on arguing against something that nobody is arguing. Congratulations, you win against the argument that no one's making.
To pin the fact that mutants are minorities as proof that it's social justice. It's both intellectually lazy and dishonest.
What is it then? Tell us what it is then. What is it? The X-Men are minorities, and thus they deal with issues that minorities deal with. How is that not a social justice issue? Explain that one. So before the series came out, all these chuds are grifting on it hard. But then, the series comes out, and the algorithm's hot for content on it. And these chuds go silent. People are overwhelmingly loving the series, and these guys have no idea what to do. They are geared only for outrage. And how do you do outrage on a show that is pretty unambiguously awesome? They could just lie and grift off it, hoping their fans won't watch, but if they do, they'll get a backlash. We did see a couple of examples of this. And since these guys have pretty much trained themselves out of doing positive content, the best they can do is positive content that just bashes something to compare it to, a la Rings of Power versus House of the Dragon. They say nothing. Then, towards the end of the season run, something unexpected happens. A couple prominent chuds that had absolutely bashed on the show before it was released revealed that they loved the show, even calling it a masterpiece. Sure, there's all types of things said in these tweets I disagree with. The animation X-Men 97 is insanely good, and many of the women absolutely would be called girl bosses if it meant they could make money off it, as demonstrated above. Rogue, Jubilee, and Jean all have scenes where they are badass and they put a man in his place. But still, they admit the show is good and it feels like progress. Then the series ends and the algorithm on the show lessens, and suddenly an angle for outrage clicks arises. The show never made the top 10 in the Nielsen rankings. There are numerous reasons for this. Being animated will lessen its reach, as many people are simply less interested in watching animated series. The show has 10 half-hour episodes, and Nielsen measures minutes watched, meaning X-Men 97 will have less minutes watched than many. Many of the series that are in that top 10 have years of history behind them. Also, Nielsen is an old way to measure ratings, when broadcast TV was the big medium before these businesses had streaming numbers with view counts, which they absolutely have now. Now, the streamers aren't super giving with the numbers, but the show has been renewed for 2 more seasons. Something you don't typically do if the show is a bomb. But that doesn't matter, because now these guys can make money calling the show a flop, which many did, including one of the guys who called the show a masterpiece.
All right, since we're talking about this and Marvel, here is a great example of people being turned off and they don't even come back for good things now. X-Men 97, I find to be the biggest proof of brand damage for them, because this show is legit and nobody cares.
This is the Griftblade Bear, and X-Men 97 did so much work that the initiative couldn't even dream of exposing in these culture war grifters. Look at the Critical Drinker, posting videos on every Marvel property he can, and even veering away if he'll make money for stuff like Velma and Rings of Power. But for a dude who seems to mostly make content on geek culture, his main channel goes silent on X-Men 97. Same can be said for Nerdrotic. A few noteworthy anti-fan chuds that go after it while it's on get blazed in the comments.
X-Men 97 has completely destroyed Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers. It's over. It's done. It was a good run, but it's time to pack it up. It's over. I wanted to keep going, but this show has completely exposed me as the grifter that I always have been.
Sure, John Delarose and John F. Trent can make articles for chuds to read in their videos, but all it is Grifter being regurgitated into more grift in the form of YouTube videos. Also, keep in mind, the grifter sphere follows multiplicity rules, where every clone gets dumber than the last.
Doug, I'd like you to meet 4. I got a lot. That guy gave it to me. I would drive a car.
We saw at the very beginning of this that showrunner Beau Demayo was a gay black man who Disney hired for his gay black experience. He said so.
Is he safe with that razor? I mean... Yeah, we take the blade out. 2 and I shave him at night while he's sleeping. It's cute, I think.
But here is the real piece that exposes so much of how this grift works. See, so much is based on flashy headlines, and many times that headline will look weird to many people because the instinctive response is, so? See, when John F. Trent writes an article called X-Men 97 executive producer Beau Demayo reveals serious story is revealed by his experience as a gay black man for Bounty in the Comics, and releases it a year before the show even premieres, many people don't care. Hell, I would expect Beau's experiences as a gay black man would inform the story, just like my experiences as a straight white guy informs anything I write. We draw from our own personal experiences, but this is even more malicious than that. Would you like to see the quote John F. Trent is pulling from? Here it is.
Came up with a pitched it to Kevin Feige, and him and Brad could not have been more just supportive and also just encouraging to make sure that we got it right. I think one of my favorite parts was like they were truly interested in like what my experience as a black gay man was and how it was going to inform the story we were telling, and that to them was like, that is how we're going to make this authentic, because really what you're talking about with X-Men is like all of us, like, I don't care what your religion, your nationality, your sex, your gender, you walked into a room full of people and you've gone, oh my gosh, there is no one in here like me. And I think that is ultimately what X-Men is trying to get at.
That's it. Beau revealing that he was asked how his experience would inform the story, and Beau revealing that he didn't view it that way. If you listen to these grifters, you'd probably say that's the answer you'd want to hear, but that doesn't get the outrage clicks. So instead, they grifted up a bit, and abracadabra, your fun little clip becomes outrage bait. And that's it. When you look into these stories of outrage, 99% of the time, it's all bull. They do so many videos and stories about how media executives or company or celebrity calls out fans. But when you look carefully, the real story is always much more nuanced. Remember when Brie Larson says she hates all white men? Except she didn't say that. She would just like more women and minorities represented in media critics.
Am I saying that I hate white dudes? No, I'm not.
Or how Samuel L. Jackson mocked all Marvel fans. Except he didn't. He just called out incels for attacking Brie Larson nonstop. Or how the Star Wars Twitter page called all fans racist. Except it didn't. It just said don't be a racist. Or how Jinx Monsoon and Ncuti Gatwa said, actually, let's look at Doctor Who next time, because that's a pretty huge mess. So X-Men 97 proved to be a fantastic show that also dismantled many outrage grifter tactics without even trying. This is a great show on its own merits, but it also managed to do incidental good to online media discourse as well. I remember in 2022 debunking waves of Obi-Wan Kenobi, She-Hulk, and Rings of Power grifter videos. They would find a narrative against the show and run with it, but those have become less and less as time goes by. They had some fun with Velma, and it seems like they again have some traction with Doctor Who right now, but not much else. They got some views with the Marvels, but that was a pale imitation of what they achieved grifting off the original Captain Marvel. So the grift appears to be dying, but it's important to keep calling it out. If we forget, then they'll just rise up again in the background. Let's not forget, these grifters were seen as a joke in the general film discourse and not taken seriously, and thus ignored, and use that ignorance to build their bubble to the point where they've become impossible to ignore. So even with the grift dying, it's important to keep debunking and destroying these false narratives. They lie for money, and that should be called out as much as possible. And called out until it is frankly dead. Toxic online discourse is targeted at vulnerable minds that could be saved. Their goal is to manipulate them into thinking they need to fight a culture war that frankly only exists in online discourse. Sure, you can find message boards of men screaming at Ghostbusters 2016 and Brie Larson, but the rest of the world outside has moved on. Hell, I posted my first thumbnail for this video announcing that I had a rough draft of my script finished, and suddenly I got a wave of anti-fans declaring my video garbage and X-Men 97 woke trash without even giving this video a chance. Sounds almost like bad faith. But in the end, X-Men 97 is the best version of the X-Men we've ever gotten outside the comic books. And even then, it's better than many runs. Hell, it made me realize how we've been ripped off with those Fox X-Men movies that are at best a pale imitation of how awesome the X-Men could be. X-Men 97 is a sign that the MCU is looking at a new future. If their X-Men movies are anything like X-Men 97, then the future of the MCU is very bright indeed. But before I go completely, please make sure to like, subscribe, and go to the description box for a list of a whole bunch of great channels. Stay tuned for next time when we look at a certain time-traveling alien.
Books, records, films, these things matter. Call me shallow. It's the fucking truth.
Now, if you already dislike these anti-woke grifters and want to know how to fight them, there is something easy you can do right now. I know it sounds self-serving, but liking this video, commenting, and subscribing to this channel do help take algorithm space away from these grifters. Also, make sure to like, comment, and sub to other channels just attempting to give honest takes on YouTube. They are becoming a rarity and should be recognized. A couple of great channels I would recommend include Organized Chaos Podcast, Actual Fandom, Turf Nation, Eric's Reloaded, Eric Debunks, Pop Counterculture, Forced Adversity Podcast, Mr. TARDIS, Pillar of Garbage, Bob of the Old Ways, Nothing But Media, Blurred Without Fear, Blurry Films, Chariot, Edgier Than Thou, My 2 Cents of Nonsense, Bobby Quarters, and many, many more.